It's now 1 week since the early access launch of Path of Exile 2. I played the Warrior. I wanted to talk a little bit about the launch, my experience, and the Warrior itself. Now, the launch was, in my opinion, pretty successful. We had like 3 hours of instability, but after that I was able to play for quite a long time without really any problems. I picked the Warrior, I went into the game. As you have to be a lot more careful, you can't just run around, you have to, at some points, even deal with mobs one by one, depending on the mob type, which makes it a lot more methodical, which I did enjoy quite a bit. The bosses were very enjoyable as well, because you now have the ability to stun them, get a little damage window. It is quite enjoyable, the whole campaign. It took me like 20 hours to complete all 6 acts, which was already enjoyable enough. It's a really enjoyable campaign. We only have the first 3 acts. We have to wait for the second 3 parts to really see where the story is going. All the 3 acts were very distinguishable. The maps itself, they are huge in a campaign. You have all these little checkpoints. They want to introduce the ability to teleport from checkpoint to checkpoint, which is going to alleviate one of the biggest issues, and that is that if you are unlucky and you want to do everything in a map, you have to backtrack a lot, because you don't know where to go at the first time. And sometimes you get to the exit, but you have an optional objective and you have to backtrack the whole way, which was not that good. The teleport should remedy that. I hope they do something similar for endgame maps. Sometimes they are linearly to a point. Sometimes you just miss something in the very beginning and you have to backtrack the whole map, even though you cleared everything, so you're just running for like 2 minutes. I hope they just introduce teleport checkpoints for the beginning and the end and maybe the middle of the map. So you have like 3 points where you can fast travel to. That would be very nice. If they do not do that, you are more or less required to have movement speed on your boots. Without movement speed, it's going to take forever to get from A to B in maps. Now, in terms of Warrior, I went with the Titan. Idea was heavy stun enemy, blow them up, have fun that way. It works fine. I did not go Thunder in the end because it has like a long charge up time. The problem is, in some cases I don't feel as tanky. It is very strange. Sometimes, or most of the times, you can just stay there, you take a lot less damage, you can regenerate with your flask or maybe some life leech. And sometimes, I mean, Chaos, okay, Chaos, I'm gonna get chunked by Chaos, but sometimes I'm getting chunked by normal elemental damage and I'm just melting and I have no idea why. So it is very strange. It does not look like Chaos damage, which is, it could be part Chaos damage, who knows. But that the problem in that is just that a lot of my abilities at the moment, because we only have the mace skills, which are generally slower, are slow or have a large charge up time. As example, I have like Phoenix Strike. This takes like 2 seconds to charge up. Granted, I'm two-hander. The hammer takes like 2 seconds to call down. Thunder takes like 2 seconds. Supercharged Slam takes 2 seconds. Stampede takes a while. Even Leap Slam takes a while. You have a lot of abilities that takes a long time to get off, or have a long time to get the payoff, and you can't really just stand still. Which means that for bosses, sure, I have the hammer, I have my Phoenix Strike for bosses and rare mobs, but for normal mobs and groups, I just use Rolling Slam. It's one of the first abilities you get. benefit, you are just always moving. So if there's an AoE below me, if I use the skill, I'm most of the time getting out of that AoE. And I'm not dying as much as I did in the beginning when I used Supercharged Slam or tried Thunder. I was always getting chunked for like half my HP. And that is why I would probably not recommend the Titan to anyone as it stands right now. Unless you are really sure, yeah, you want to play it like this. You could potentially build like a crossbow or whatever, maybe a mage, I don't know. You can always experiment. But I would probably not recommend two-handed Titan to anyone right now. Yeah, one of the other points, I mean, these are just like my experiences. Now, I do have a couple gripes with the game. Two specific ones. One is loot. They increase the amount of loot, which is fine. The problem for me is the loot that you got, the rare loot, which is rarer, yeah, is most of the time is just not good. Now, I was under the assumption that you get less loot, but the loot is just generally better. That is a trade-off. You get less, but it is better. So it feels like they assume that if you find something that is rare, you are just going to be excited because it's rare. That is not the case. You are mostly excited because it's something good or potentially good. But because most of the yellow items I found are generally just bad, and sometimes they are mediocre, and really rarely they are good, it just means, hey, if I find a rare item, it's just like, nah, disenchant, get one of the shards for the Regal Orb, and yay. So what I did because the other way to get rare good items, you can buy items from the vendor. The problem is I don't know when the vendor resets, so I don't have a reliable way to really get new inventory out of these vendors. So if they don't have anything in here, I'm just bound until I get a level up, because I know a level up is going to give them new items. Additionally, probably the best way to get good items is the whatever they were called, these guys, expedition. You can get good items from these guys, or you just quote-unquote craft, which just means most of the time you just have like a base item, which I have 0 of these that are, oh, wrong tab. You just get like a base item, you just make the magic. Oh, okay, some resistance, nice. You give them another mod, some armor, okay, you make them rare. I guess I'm getting lucky here. Okay, that is a very good example. Some spirit. Fuck me, I guess. Okay, that is going to be a new armor piece for me. But most of the time it just ends up in something like this, which is, I can't really work with that. So what you do is you take 3 of these items, you put them into the reforge bench, reforge, get one more try, and rinse and repeat. You do have the options of like essences, so you can target some modifiers, and then advanced ones, which makes these ones make a normal item magic, and these ones the magic to rare, which means that most of the time I just go and get a base. These ones, because I'm strength, are mostly crafted, quotation marks. I just get a bunch of bases, like for a potential mage, and then just try essences, try just luck like I did right now, and hope I hit something good. In most cases I'm not, then you reforge, you get another try, You put it back in here, like this one, and then you just wait until you get 3 and reforge. Not very exciting. Omens are another option. They give you some, they modify like your currency items you put on. I was only able to get 2 omens, and I had another omen in a ritual which I couldn't buy because it had no price. I could not defer as well because it had no price, which was pretty useless. At the moment I'm trying to make this one useful in some way. And for me the biggest problem is just, if I find an item on the ground, my assumption is I feel it should just be better. We had GGG introduced the Loot 2.0 like a couple years ago, and they tried that with talismans, which were corrupted amulets, and it was so good that everyone wanted to use the talismans. They were so broken, and GGG said, okay, we are going to remove that. And as far as I remember, they said, hey, we want to reintroduce that for Path of Exile 2. I don't feel that at all. They do have different tiers for items. Sometimes you have like an item that has unidentified, and next to the unidentified line is tier 2, tier 3. I don't know if that is only for those modifiers or if the item is a tier. It is not notified in any way. This was a tier 2 modifier I identified, which is 5% physically just mana. Maybe that is where the better loot comes from, but in the early to mid game, where I am at like level 80, level 70 to level 80, it feels very bad, the rare loot. I am also an SSF. I can't migrate out because it's at the moment blocked. So I can only talk about here. If you have trade, most of the problems go away. But the whole idea was, hey, you don't really need loot filters. You are not as reliant on trade for like mid-tier items. Naturally, end-game items or high-tier items, different story. But for mid-tier items, it also doesn't feel like you have as much access. I'm running around like with this ring, which has some chaos resistance and code resistance because I'm not getting much better stuff. Which brings me to another problem. And this one I see a bigger problem as the other one, and that is the rune system. They doubled down. You cannot replace runes, which I feel is going to be just a net negative. People are always throwing around, oh wait, and decisions have to matter, and bullshit here and bullshit there just to have a bad system, in my opinion. Because the biggest point is, we removed all the sockets because we didn't want to have the gem system like in Path of Exile 1, where you needed to have 6 sockets or 4 in case of armor, helmet, boots and stuff. You have to link those and you have to have them in the right color. So whenever you picked up a better item or you made a better item, you could not equip that better item unless you got all the sockets right again. Now that was a big problem, or it generally is the big problem in Path of Exile 1. Now in Path of Exile 2, you don't have them anymore. Gems are in a separate menu. We are making a good step forward. But now, with the runes, if you use the runes like I did at the moment, because I can't just manifest gear that fixes all my resistance, so I use the runes naturally. That is what they are for. I now have the problem that I have a ring with some chaos resistance, fire resistance, and extra chaos resistance, because chaos resistance I need more. So if I want to equip this ring, I now have a less code resistance. Now I have a little bit more fire and lightning resistance. I can't use that new ring because my code resistance goes below the max, or close to whatever the max would be, like a 76. So I'm now not code capped anymore, which means I could remedy that if I just replace one of my fire runes, maybe. Which one has this one? I could replace this one in a code rune, and then my resistances would be fine and I would have a nice upgrade. But I can't use the new ring unless I find a new piece of armor that is similar or better than the ones I have at the moment, to then get a free socket to then fix the resistance. So that is why I believe with runes should be replaceable. It doesn't have to be cheap, and that is where you can have weight, like in the respec system. You could have a definite cost to these systems for replacing, like let's say 20k gold or 50k gold, so that you don't do it every time, or you have to work toward replacing a rune. But just saying, yeah, you can't. So you get into positions where you have upgrades, which you cannot do because you cannot fix your resistance anymore with runes. Those two systems are the ones I see the problem with at the moment. The items, you can always fix changing some of the values, some of the rows, and maybe the tier 4 and 5 items are better. Who knows? But the rune system, I feel like they are just a roadblock for not needing to be a roadblock in building your character into the mid to end game.